We start this hour following the developments out of Syria, where pressure continues to build along the border with Turkey. Now, migrants are fleeing the violence, and now the Turkish government is allowing them to pass on through to the European Union, where they're headed towards Greece. Now, violence grew over the weekend after the Turkish government launched a new operation against the Syrian government after at least 36 Turkish soldiers were killed just last week. World leaders are calling for calm ahead of talks between Turkish President Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin later on this week. Now, the fear is that an all-out war could drag in NATO and Russia, but on opposing sides. So for more, we bring in journalist and author Dan Lazare and John Sitilides, a geopolitical strategist at Trilogy Advisors. I want to start off with talking about, is Turkey allowing all of these refugees to flood through, go to Greece in hopes of saying, you know what, EU, NATO, you need to get involved in this situation and back me up in what I'm doing within Syria? John, how do you view it?
Well, Turkey already has about 3.5 to 4 million Syrian and other Middle Eastern refugees within its borders. And this has been the case for about nearly 5 years, and it's been extraordinarily painful for the Turkish economy, the Turkish labor force, the Turkish education system. They don't want any more refugees coming in from Idlib or any place else and coming into Turkey. So that's issue number one for Erdogan, no more refugees. It was popular in 2015. It's no longer popular. As for Greece, President Erdogan is always looking for another reason to find ways to destabilize the political situation in Athens. It's been very problematic the last several years, and I think allowing many of these refugees to go through Turkey into Greece and en route to Europe, because they're not going to stay in Greece. The refugees that are there are already having a very difficult time because Greece can't accommodate tens of thousands of refugees on its own. This is really to send a message to Brussels and to Germany that they need to step up and take care of their part of the commitment for the deal that was struck in 2016, which Erdogan feels they have not lived up to.
Well, that's the thing, Dan. When you look at this, is it going to work? Because with these refugees, you're right, the Greek economy is already failing. A lot of these economies are already cannot handle the onslaught of refugees. Is this going to motivate the EU to step up and get involved? And in this case, it is something with Syria, something that President Trump said, don't do what you're going to do, Turkey, and they still did it. So is it going to further involve NATO and the United States in the area in this conflict that seems to be continuing to go between Syria and Turkey, and obviously pulling in Russia and the EU now?
I have no sense at all that NATO has any stomach whatsoever for any military operations between Turkey and Russia. And Turkey doesn't want a war with Russia, and Russia doesn't want a war with Turkey. That would activate Article 5 of the NATO treaty. And the U.S. has made very clear this is an issue for Turkey and Russia to hammer out on their own. We will offer political support. There'll be lots of rhetorical support from Europe as well. But military operations and any serious hardware on the ground, I don't see it.
Dan, do you agree with this?
I agree. A war is the last thing the EU wants, but I think the EU is being dragged into a war regardless. Erdogan wants to bring NATO into the war. He's desperate for support. He's obviously blundered very badly in going into Idlib and putting his troops in harm's way, and he's looking for backup. But the EU does not want to get involved. But the question is how long it can keep aloof. And my sense is the war is just widening steadily, and everybody's being drawn in. So it's kind of getting harder and harder to say no.
Okay, so then if you were looking at it, Danny, then the way you look at it, you're right. Everybody is kind of being drawn in this. It's like, okay, which bad action should we reward so to stop other bad actions from happening? In this case, why isn't Erdogan, somebody just saying, Erdogan, stop this type of action. What you're doing in Idlib, going into Syria, this type of aggressiveness is not going to be good for your country. I don't see anybody except for Syria and Russia punishing Turkey, except saying, hey, we just don't want to get involved. That's not punishment enough to shut down Erdogan's actions, is it?
No. I mean, first of all, Erdogan went into Syria with U.S. approval. So therefore, he has U.S. backing and hence NATO backing all along. But the U.S. and NATO are trying to limit their involvement. But that gets harder and harder to do the more the war widens, and it's widening now dramatically. It's exploding, in fact. Well, so it's difficult to see how much longer they can stay aloof. And Erdogan has gotten his fingers very badly burned. He didn't think that he would get into trouble in Idlib. It was a no-lose proposition, but it's turned into a no-win proposition. His troops are getting hit very badly. The Syrian army is advancing with Russian support, and it's just unclear how he can avoid getting dragged in himself more and more deeply. And therefore, as that happens, he will call on his allies for support. And it's getting harder and harder for them to say no.
But you obviously know there's been a difference in administrations. Obviously, we know that the U.S. did want a regime change with Assad. They wanted Assad out of there. President Trump, though, has made it time and time again, said, don't continue this advance into Syria. We're not going to continue. Do you still believe that Trump has tried to continue what the works of this previous administrations have done? Or has he basically said, nope, we're not going to back you up in this aggressive move as you try to expand the Ottoman Empire?
Well,
or recreate it.
It's just hard. It's very hard to figure out what's on Trump's mind. He says one thing and does another. I mean, yes. I mean, he's definitely pulled back from some of the Obama administration's actions, but in other respects, he's been more aggressive. So where he'll wind up, we don't know. He's unpredictable, but as the war heats up, I just think the U.S. is just going to find itself dragged in more and more deeply. Well, and that's just my feeling.
Right, and that's the thing, John. This is not good for President Trump. He's just now signing to get out of Afghanistan, much to the cheers of, obviously, his base supporters. But I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle are saying 19 years is enough. Now you have this case. President Trump is also going, hey, Turkey, you bought Russia's military system. This is your call. We offered you ours. Now you're calling for ours to try to back it up because you're worried. Do you really think in the regards, and the same could be said about the U.S., would Russia, obviously Turkey bought the Russia military system here. Do you think that they would manipulate that in any way? Or does that not do long-term damage to the credibility of the type of military equipment that comes out of Russia? Just the same could be said as the U.S., that no one would buy the United States for fear that it would be manipulated.
I don't see that kind of 3D chess being played right here. I mean, we need to be very clear about what the immediate goals are, and we'll see what happens when Vladimir Putin welcomes President Erdogan to Moscow on Thursday and see if these two leaders can negotiate a ceasefire to the current operations. But the Turks announced several days ago, and I don't know if we can believe them, that they've neutralized over 2,000 Syrian troops, and they've continued to pound that area in Syria with serious bombardment over the last several days. The Russians really want this military operation to be over. They want to help consolidate power under Bashar al-Assad, and Russia wants to be able to maintain its air and naval bases under the 49-year leases that were signed several years ago. The Turks don't want any more refugees coming into Turkey. They want European to help. They want European assistance, but I don't see the EU taking any single step, and Russia would love nothing more than chaos inside of NATO caused by Turkey's appeal for help from Brussels and from the U.S. So this is going to remain complex and dangerous, at least until Thursday. We'll see what Putin and Erdogan can hammer out.
And the question is, does the EU actually even have those resources to invest in that area? Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue to watch the situation. We'll have you back on.